I'll put this hat back on, dude. Round 2 means
Part 2.
we change things. Okay. Came back from a quick pee and tech break because our tech also took a break.
Yeah, it did. But
I was... So,
night 2.
night 2.
I mean, it was pretty nice for both of us, I guess. At least the way I would quickly describe it is one of the greatest concerts I had ever been to. Ultimately, it really was. The music really took over for me. Yeah, it was one of the best concert experiences I had ever had. The music became my focus, and we didn't really allude to any of my background, but as pretty much lifelong musician at some degree to another, that became the richness of that experience for me, was experiencing music in a different way. This perspective might cater more toward, anyone with a more of an artistic inclination. I had never had like that kind of relationship with music before. Having done it all through college, what I majored in, like this was these experiences that I feel like I could have only kind of discovered there, or at least in my case, it was a first in a very, I want to cautiously use the word, spiritual sense. And maybe that had been different had I grown up in church, which I did not, but it felt that way. And it was somewhat of a religious setting. We're in a temple. The songs obviously serve a purpose, and they carry specific messages, even if you don't, and in most cases, don't understand the language. There was a lot of Spanish. Did you say there was some Sanskrit?
Yeah. Very old childhood hymn from the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Asto ma sadgamaya, tamso ma jyotirgamaya. I remember this, dude. Mrityor ma amritam gamaya. But they were singing this.
Yeah.
In their own way. And it was beautiful.
It was captivating. It became the only focus, and it was cool because just before serving on the second night, one of the guides came up to me and told me, if I feel inspired at all during that evening to come and join them to sing a song or play something, like, by all means. And early on in the evening, I was kind of waiting for that moment, but then I realized that was an egotistic kind of motivation, a little bit. It's like just to get up and go play, it's like, because I know that they would be listening. And I realized that, I think, pretty quickly. I didn't stew on it. And I didn't end up joining them that night for any of the music, mostly because I didn't know any of the songs, in large part, and some of which I'm learning now. But just being able to get past some of the emotional things, having, I think, captured a lot of what I needed to in the moment. On the emotional struggle side, once all that was sort of had blown over in a way, it just became about soaking in the sound around us. It was amazing. And it was different because it wasn't about, when you go to a concert, especially shows that I think are marketed very intentional in being somewhat transcendental. I think of like old Grateful Dead, but then also today, I know I'm not too well versed on electronic music, but I know trance is kind of a thing for certain rave types and whatnot, I think. It's kind of, I would possibly equate to something like that, having never experienced it though, because it was about the sound. It wasn't about the artist. It wasn't about the image. It was about what was surrounding you sonically. And it was very honest, and it was very raw, and it was intentional, and it was serving. And it was through that I came to some shifts in my perspective around music, which is the most compelling music, most functional music.
Optimized music.
I would cautious to use that word.
While drink. Yeah. Most productive music.
Most productive music. The most compelling music serves often, I think, one of three purposes. The most compelling music is usually at least one of three things in its intention, which is to heal, to soothe, or to resolve. And all the music that night did at least one of those things. And when I had that thought, and I wrote it down, following, going to San Diego afterward and then coming home, I had started to think about the music I'm most drawn to. At least that's the past few years, and the ones that I find myself going back to. And they do capture one of those three qualities, at least for me, and that can be pretty subjective person to person. Something that's very healing for someone else can be, just like an empty calorie of a song for another person. But it added to my love and appreciation, and even venture to say obsession with music, in listening to it, in writing it, just putting it in my life as many places as possible often serves one of those purposes. So that night 2 reinforced my love for music, and I think gave me a little more understanding as to why it has been the vehicle in my life ever since literally my earliest memory was sitting in a diaper on the carpet looking up at my dad playing guitar in our living room out in Lake Fort Gibson in Oklahoma. That's my earliest childhood memory. And ever since then, it's been the same thing for 26 years at this point, and it's had its evolutions. There's a theme I wanted to get into. I wrote a few topics down, because one thing you mentioned that we had talked about, I think, on the drive out to San Diego, and I had just listened to one of your conversations the other night, and you brought up the conversation that we had about the effort is the prize. And if any of my old friends from Arizona are watching this, they're probably chuckling at that because they know exactly where it comes from. And I'll tell you that story because it leads into something else. One of the biggest takeaways through the experience was my dissolving belief in coincidence. And I had this conversation with another good buddy that I play in a band with, who kind of helped me get close to it, was not really believing in coincidences anymore. And it's really hard to believe in any coincidence at this point, because when I moved out here, start of high school, fell into the marching band scene. That took over my life. Became an absolute nerd for the snare drum and anything about drum lines and marching bands. And from the ages of 14 to 22, every year I auditioned for drum corps, which was an incredible learning experience. Having not made one until the very end, kind of, which I'll get there, really reinforced the habit and obsession for just playing and practicing, because you're forced to if you really want to do it well. So having gone to these auditions for, some of the most elite music organizations in the country for marching music, getting cut every year, by the way, was immensely fruitful. It was pretty expensive too, but it was worth it. It wasn't until my age out year, what would have been my age out year. You can't march past 22 to 23 years old, depending on your birthday. I was out in Arizona. I had taken a gap year from Berkeley and done a season of WGI, which was indoor competitive drumline. So I had made that. I had done the marching band at Arizona State, which I had a fantastic time doing. I was having so much fun. I was working 3 jobs. I took a break from college. I wasn't sure I was going to go back. And all I wanted to do was finally get on the field and go on a summer tour with a world-class drum. That was my goal from the age of 14 up until I was 22. It lasted a long time. Audition season came. I went to the academy, which is out of Tempe, Phoenix area. I got to the very end. It was the furthest I'd ever gotten in a audition, and it got down to between me and one other guy, and it was so, he was phenomenal. He was so good. Everybody was great. That line that year was fantastic. And it got down to the point on the last day of the final rounds of auditions. Everybody's lined up. We're going through a piece of the show. And he said, he had us both right next to each other on the line and said, we're going to do this. We're going to play this section over and over again until one of you makes the smallest mistake. And whoever does, you're cut. Because it's like, what else do you do? At that point, all you can do is test their focus. Sound quality and skill level and all that. It was pretty close.
Can I just say something right here?
Yeah.
I love that you used the word focus in this scenario. Because focus here meant that you are saying no to as many errors as possible.
Yeah.
And I think focus means saying no to as many things as possible that are not the thing that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the only differentiator in creating excellence is how many things are not the thing that you are doing. And how can you get rid of that?
Yeah. Well, it won't lend itself to say that I ended up breaking first. I lost focus first, but ultimately I messed up some lick, and that's when he cut the whole line off. I was like, all right, decision's made. Like, all right, understood. That was me. A few months passed. So these auditions were done, I think, in December. Summer was coming up. Spring. I think we were in March or April, and I got a message from that caption head that year. And he asked me if I was still looking to March. I was actually planning to go back to college and do summer classes, and because it had already been taking me 5 years to get a 4-year degree. But no, this is my last shot. And he reached out to me and said one guy got injured, and they had a last spot open. And he asked if I wanted it. Absolutely. I'll be there. When do I need to be there? He's like, next week. Great. So at this point, the whole line had been preparing for months, going to rehearsals. They had all the show music. They had already started learning the drill on the field. I was jumping into it right away and playing catch up the whole time, which is a challenge in itself. And ended up moving into spring training. I moved into spring training and thought that, like, all right, I got my shot. This is the last year I have to be able to do this. And out of some miracle, I got the chance to do it. Heck yeah. Show up. I think it had been 3 days. And we're in Phoenix. It's hot, man. Just to set the scene, it's hot. And this is the hardest music I'd ever had to play. This was the hardest drill I was ever asked to learn. It was a massive challenge. I got to the end of the week, and I was behind. I was already behind coming in, but I was really struggling to keep up and retain the information and really be a solid contributing member. But, I said yes right away. On top of that, I should add, drum corps is one of the few major league sports that you actually don't get paid to do. In fact, you pay to do it. You pay a few thousands of dollars to do it for a few months. But time came, we're in the middle of that week. I'm already struggling just to hold my spot at that point. And they also needed me to pay my tour fees. That's where reality set in. I was like, all right, I can pay to do this for 3-4 months, or maybe I could go back to college and use that to pay my rent to live in Boston. And that was a really hard decision to make. But I quit. I dropped out. I had already paid half my tour fees, which was a lot. And I just couldn't muster the stomach to make that kind of commitment. So I left. And fortunately, they were able to get one of they call them vets, one of the guys that had marched in years prior to come in and take the spot. And so they weren't left in the dust, fortunately. I quit to save some money and go do something else. Get more prepared to finish college and commit more to music in a different way. Had I not done that, I would not be sitting right here. I wouldn't be in Austin, probably. Quitting drum corps was one of the most pivotal and beneficial decisions I ever made. Because since I quit that summer, I got an internship. I reached out to, I think, 4 or 5 recording studios in Austin. One of them got back to me.
And that's the one we know.
And that's the one we know and love. So I ended up spending the summer out in Wimberley, Texas.
Texas!
Shout out Texas. Shout out Bucky. Ended up moving out to Wimberley for a few months and working at Yellow Dog Studios. I am still very close to now. They've moved to San Marcos. I've moved to San Marcos. And it became like my family. A second family, an extension of my family. Some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. Some of the most influential, formative, and just influential. And the reason I want to tie that back to not believing in coincidences, because I had doubted my decision to quit drum corps leading up to this. I was dealing with a lot of that regret. I was like, I got exactly what I wanted, and I gave it up for one or a couple reasons, and I just could not quite settle with that. It was tough. So I went out to meet the guys at Yellow Dog, and I walked in to the studio, and I looked at all the albums on the wall, and I recognized most of them. These were records that my dad would keep CDs of in his truck. I looked up and I saw Jason Boland and the Stragglers, and Reckless Kelly, and Cross Canadian Ragweed, and so much of this music of my childhood I didn't realize came from there until I walked in the door. Tells you how great I am at doing research. It was at that moment I walked in, I was like, this is right where I'm supposed to be. I made the right decision. I was able to trust that decision at that point. That sealed the deal. And then I got to meet Dave Percival, who started it back in the 90s and still a dear friend today. And we hit it off. And he was kind and gracious. He let me live on the property, work on every project that came through the door. And it got to meet just people I would never expect to. I got some folks that I grew up listening to. Some folks that my dad was just a massive idolizer of. And he ultimately wanted to be a songwriter. And, he had a wife and kids, and he got his MBA and did all that. But he always played. Anytime he wasn't at work or taking care of the family, he was sitting on the porch playing guitar, writing songs.
Sounds an awful lot like you.
I've inherited some habits, you could say. And one of the best things that came from that was I knew once I had gotten there that I wanted to be able to share it, specifically with him. So when he got diagnosed with stage 4, a week before we found out that news, we had booked a weekend at Yellow Dog because I wanted to bring him out to record a bunch of songs because he had never formally recorded any songs. So I wanted to record a bunch of his songs and some songs of his best friend that he grew up with in Oklahoma. So we invited them down. Brother flew out from Arizona. We made it a family weekend. We all went out to the river in Wimberley, stayed at the studio, recorded as much music as possible. And again, it's taking away from that belief in coincidences. Because we had booked this trip. Week after booking it, we get the news that he's got a year. And at that moment, we're like, well, this matters more than anything now. This is the most important thing now to me, capturing that. And doing it in a place that had been a part of our lives forever, it turned out. And so that's what we did. And I still have all those recordings, and I've put some of them up online for the family to listen to. And it's one of my favorite moments in my life was getting to bring him in that place and my brothers and kind of just feel the history and the essence and, let him sit behind the same microphones and in the same chairs as some of his heroes and sing his song. It was obviously very emotional. It was a very emotionally charged weekend. All that to say, had I not quit drum corps, quit something I thought I had wanted before, that never would have happened.
Trust.
I had to trust that decision. And it was hard. But something in me knew I had to leave it. I had to quit it. As much as I loved it and obsessed over it for, about 6, 7 years, I really had to let it go. And I did. And it has led to some of my favorite things in my life right now. Getting to have done that with my father, and also still being able to go there now and work with artists, play in bands, and make friends that some of the most unique people, most inspirational people, one-of-a-kind characters that cannot imagine meeting anywhere else. And it's a tribe in its own. They really look out for each other. I love it. It's a massive part of my life. The coincidences, I'm not so sure anymore. I think a lot of that was somehow planned by some greater force. Everything lined up just a little too well. My suspicions are still there, so I don't think any of that's coincidental.
Music, for you, has been such a core part of your life.
It's been my vehicle.
For what?
Moving through life, navigating life, having something to do, having a way to contribute, to stay in motion. It's saved me from stagnation and pretty critical points in time.
I love that, man. I love that for you. It's a big lesson to take away. Music for me, and the second night was a lot about music too for me, but in a very different way. Because you might know that I was not listening to any music since we know each other.
Yeah.
The only time I listened to music was if I was in your car and we're driving to work together.
Madari.
Like literally, that's like my those songs and the songs like other songs you play at 6 a.m. in the morning as we're driving to the office.
Some Erykah Badu to set the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that had been since I moved to Austin. Almost 3 years ago now. Over 3 years ago. Close to it. I remember not getting into music. Somewhere right before Austin, I had completely switched off to music.
I cannot imagine.
Dude, I was living it. You don't have to imagine it. Honestly, all I was doing was every moment that I was listening to music had just been taken over by being as present without music and just being there. And I noticed in those moments that music is so present everywhere. You can't escape it in any ways. Even if I'm not listening to music, guess what I'm doing? I'm going to the gym. Guess what's happening in the gym? There's music playing. If I'm walking down the streets in downtown Austin, music's playing. If I'm in my house trying to fall asleep, frat party music's playing. Music is everywhere. It's almost impossible to not be around some version of music. But when I heard the music during the ayahuasca ceremony, it just switched into what a powerful force it is for creating change. Because every emotion that I was feeling through it, I could resonate with the music that was coming with it. And at times where I was feeling stuck, when they moved the music from whatever they were playing to something new, I went with it, and it changed the way that I was thinking and the way that I was experiencing this ceremony. It was magical. It was magical, and it brought back the love for listening to music, which had been gone for 3 years. And I had known, like, people around me, my mom, you, a couple other people are so into music and listening to music all the time. My mom sings all the time when she's just by herself. And I realized, like, again, how can I fit my frame? That's the question that I was asking myself every time. And in that years that I didn't listen to music, I was like, it does not appeal to me. It does not appeal to me as a way of navigating life. And what appeals to me more is just experiencing life as is and seeing what comes up through that. But now music has become a catalyst for moving. And
We're back, baby.
we're back. And I don't have that love. Like, I don't have anywhere close to that love for music that you have. But what I do have is appreciation for it again, which I had lost. I lost that appreciation for music, and I had just thought of it as kind of a waste of time.
My gosh.
Yeah. Like, really a waste of time. And
Sounds like you were listening to some pretty bad music.
man, the music I was listening to before that was mostly EDM.
Oh. Dope.
Yeah, makes sense. It was, and it was some of the best music for moving me into action for sure. Like EDM, the frequency that it's at, the bass that it's at, like I feel like
You
I'm
couldn't
going.
sit still.
Yeah, and I would obviously listen to a lot of that in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But this time, when I listened to the music, it wasn't about hype. No, the hype is there. How can I use it for other things, like moving me from a place of movement to stillness? It became the opposite almost.
Became soothing.
Yeah, it has become now, and this is very recent because ayahuasca was 2 weeks ago, which is again crazy to think of, because it feels like it was yesterday or last week.
Kind of does, yeah.
It has become a vehicle for, wait, my mind is racing, and my thoughts are racing. How can I stop or still that? And just some music comes to mind, I play it, and the thoughts stop because again, it's me now listening to this, and it's completely stopped everything else.
Has your listening taste changed now that you're back? Find yourself listening to more music? With the situation you're talking about, I imagine you're not listening to the same music that you were prior to. Like, how has that changed your listening taste?
A lot of instrumental music, a lot of Hans Zimmer-like music, and it's been very grounding as an exercise to ground myself whenever I feel that I'm going too fast. And it's not even coming from me, that's the thing. Sometimes I feel fast, life is fast, and I'm not keeping up with it. And that's when I play this music to come back to life is as is. I have developed this notion of what fast is, and I can just stop. It is a good resetter for me now, that's what I've noticed the most. But it was very, very shocking to have that realization at 25. My mom was very sad that I had stopped listening to music for a while. And anyways, that was my takeaway from music. The other takeaway I had was the people that came to mind. I wrote down what I felt about them, and I won't give names out, but I'll give you the general things. Okay, let's talk about this for a second because I think it might actually bring some actual tangible value to someone else.
Okay.
Out of this entire conversation. Envy.
Powerful force.
Powerful force takes over your life. Takes over your life if you live in a state of envy. Social media doesn't help. But it can help.
It's simply a tool.
It is a tool and sometimes a trigger. And if you see something that is making you feel envious about someone or how their life is,
How their life seems.
would be more accurate.
It's nothing but highlight reels.
For sure. It is a question back to yourself. What is it about their life that you actually want to embody? What are qualities in them that you almost always will see in yourself, but you've only seen it in yourself in spurts or in very specific moments, which is why you haven't embodied those traits yet. I think that when you feel a gap between how you see someone show up and the traits that they have, and you see it in yourself, but you don't see it as a behavior. You see it as moments of strengths that you have shown. That gap is envy. So the question is, what do you make of it? do you go ahead and criticize yourself and the person because of that envy, or do you take inspiration from it and ask yourself, what is it that I can do to actually be that quality or trait that you are envious of? So I think envy is like your cousin for the person that you actually want to become in some ways, because it's just a trigger to show you what you can actually be. I'm almost confident, close to 100%, that when you are feeling envious, it is a positive thing that you want to embody. You're normally not envious of someone when they're doing something less than what you think you can do. Envy comes from a place of putting them up, not putting them down. Jealousy comes from that place too. So, for me, a person came up in mind, and I saw moments of envy pop up towards this person. And I noticed that this envy is coming simply because I see so much of myself in this person, but I am not embodying them on a day-to-day basis. So how can I do that and gain inspiration from this gift that I've been given? Envy is a gift to yourself of seeing the person you actually want to become. So I took that away, and that was a huge insight for me, because it almost always goes to envy and fuck this thing, and no, I don't like this. But it's not the liking, it's just the fact that you are not able to live up to that image that you have, that you can actually be, that you already see others living up to.
I'm glad you took the turn in using the word inspiration at some point later. So yeah, envy and jealousy serve a purpose, and they're poisonous. And ideally there's something to be alchemized into inspiration, because it's ultimately it's trying to cultivate something else that perhaps would be, if you recognize it, something that is a, maybe a little seedling in you as a character that you'd like to see sprout and bloom because you see it in this other person, and you'd really like to have that too. Prior to alchemizing it, changing that negativity into a positivity, changing that envy into inspiration. If you don't do that, then it's only harmful. And the hard part is to be able to recognize it, maybe. But if we're paying attention, I think, to the sensations that come. When you look at something that makes you envious versus inspired, that's the opportunity to release all that tension and see that the only effective positive out of this is for it to inspire you, to inspire a change, to inspire some kind of effort. There's a benefit to envy and jealousy if we choose to let it be beneficial. We first have to release the tension and transform them from the originating state of envy or jealousy into a state of inspiration and motivation.
I've noticed in the more recent months, since I switched over to a different setting professionally.
Congratulations, by the way, again.
Thank you. That I found myself in rooms and places that I don't feel like I belong, in the best way possible, in the most positive way possible. People that are the best in their fields, that are doing incredible things, the 0.1% of their thing that they're doing, and shaping new frontiers, shaping our future in a lot of ways. And there were two reactions. One was, I shouldn't be here. What am I doing here? How do I fit into this set of people that are so, in some ways, ahead of me in the thing that they're doing? Why am I here? Why, honestly? And then I stopped myself and I was like, wait, this has happened because maybe some actions that I've done or some behaviors that I've actually inculcated in me are already around these people, are fitting the same norms and behaviors of these people. The outcomes haven't shown, but the actions are there. And that gave me a sense of relief to understand that sometimes you might be in situations where you don't know if you fit in these situations, not because they're not the right situations for you, but because they demand something more out of you. Mm-hmm. And you have shown glimpses of that demand in previous situations in your life.
You've shown potential.
You've shown potential. Now, how can you alchemize, I love that word, alchemize, that potential and make this setting that you're in into your default behavior? And there's this gap right now between where your mind's already at, but where your body hasn't reached. Mm. And your mind can be around the people that have already been thinking about these things. And so that's why you're around them physically. But your body and the things that you're doing are only catching up to it in some time. And I double down on this. You are the 5 people that you surround yourself most with, simply because of the level of imitation we are of the people around us.
So, very adaptable.
Very adaptable as humans. And it's to not get scared, but trust yourself. Back to trust always is like you trust yourself that you can change yourself to match your surroundings. And your surroundings will match you because of that. It's a very hard thing to rationalize or put into like a logical framework, because so many times you're in situations where you're like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted, but you have no idea why you reached there.
Been there.
And the only thing that in the moment that I feel you can take away from it is you were there because it's an opportunity for you to actually see how you need to show up if you want to be there and stay there. Mm-hmm. If you want to stay there, then you will have to change your behaviors, and you have to change your habits, and you have to change your way of thinking, and you have to change your way of being. And it's a very forceful process. Mm-hmm. That's something like ayahuasca helps you at least see, but now the embodiment of it, which is what we'll come down to next, is the real deal. That's where the change actually happens. You've seen the change, but now you have to be it.
That gives me an idea that would connect. Being like that embodiment. At least what I've noticed is when I've been running into those inevitable daily moments of negativity or frustration from myself or from others, recognizing them, being able to see when they're coming, not being surprised by them, and seeing them a little more clearly, with a little more, being very empathetic and reasoning as to why I or somebody else might be feeling a certain way in a certain situation. Hmm. Kind of, whether it's a small or not so small moment of frustration, be it at work or yesterday at the post office, I could recognize that this woman is quite clearly not enjoying her job. I'm going to take an opportunity to step in and help her with this difficult customer that's trying to ship something out to Michigan. And I took that opportunity. I took that chance, and I tried to step into the situation, and the lady behind the postal worker told me, "Thank you, sir, but we got it." I was like, I stepped away. I at least saw it. I tried. Mm-hmm. She told me no thanks. She handled it with grace, but she was clearly ready to go home too. And I think normally I would have looked at something like that. When I say normally, I mean up until maybe 2 weeks ago. Would have seen something like that, done absolutely nothing, and only gotten frustrated at the fact that I'm having to wait in line what was an extra 4 to 5 minutes over this argument at the post office. And I would have done nothing. I would have said nothing. I would have simply matched their level of frustration and then when I would have been done and I would have driven home angry. And that didn't happen. I was able to at least make an effort, an unwanted effort, but an effort, and let it go as soon as it subsided. Go on about my day, wish her a nice day on the way out, you know. Being able to embody, retain the value of the time that we've spent and trust the lessons of it to carry over. It's I won't believe that it was at all a waste of time or a waste of money and travel. No, there was a reason to be there. I think at just the right time.
Yeah. Agency's coming up to me.
Agency.
Agency is a very hard to grasp concept. When people say like have agency, I feel agency is what can you do in any situation that can increase the odds of your success. And I use a very practical example. You're trying to get this role at a company and you apply to their job site and you hear nothing back from them. The decision you have there is to go to the next company and apply to another job, or ask yourself, what else can I do here? Can I find someone in the company that I know? Can I reach out to them and ask them if there's any possibility of getting a referral? Can I reach out to the hiring manager? Can I email them? Can I email 5 people in the company? That is agency. Agency is you finding other ways to get to the thing that you want to get to. I feel like a lot of times when we're in very frustrating positions or in situations where we don't want to be, we feel like we lose this agency of finding other ways. What is in our control in that moment that we can bring to the table? And you doing this, you coming up with another method to help this person out and make their day easier is an act of agency. And you not doing something and sitting there is you relieving your agency. And there's so many moments in our lives where we have the decision that we can make to act differently. And we sometimes have it pop up as well. What if I said this or did this? But we don't do it. And I feel like the people that are high agency are just constantly following that thought, what if I did this? Why not? How many different actions can I still take? Rather than just sit there and not do anything about it. And let's go into this, since it's kind of close to the ending of this. What is it tangibly or tactily that you're doing differently from this experience with ayahuasca?
This one's maybe a little more unconscious, but I notice I'm playing music a little differently. A little more freely. I learned my first song in Tamil, which has been fun.
Guys, please, anyone that's listening to this and has reached to this stage of this conversation, please comment on the YouTube or whatever you're listening to, Spotify, and just inspire Derek to post this Tamil song.
It'll come out. We'll get there. I need a couple hundred reps on it, but we'll get there. Because I can't play it without having to read the lyrics. But more tangible things on the integration side, essentially, is what you're asking. Like how...
The whole thing in ayahuasca is like you experience something. Now the question is, you take some insights out of it, you get some new things drawn out of you. How can you embody that in your everyday life? That's integration.
I'm taking my mornings a lot slower, I noticed.
Me too.
It's not to say I'm, not still feeling that urge to wake up and go for a run and, do what I need to do. But I'm not quite as frantic. I I'm not so sure that's more of a conscious decision or more of a byproduct, but it's a result of some kind that I've focused and been able to take a little more of a neutral position, I think, in many circumstances socially. Granted, I've never been terribly opinionated, I don't think.
No, you're not.
And I want to be conscious of being resistant to sharing any partiality toward a topic, toward a person. I think it's the fairest approach in pretty much any instance. Now, I won't say any instance, but most instances. So I'd say being non-partial, being okay with just kind of, just grooving. That's such a horrible way to put it. But, like, taking the mornings a little slower. I notice I'm laughing a little more. I think I'm finding things funnier, even when I'm by myself.
Yeah.
Which has been pretty wonderful. Biggest change, most noticeable change that has stuck with me that I'm really enjoying is actually the diet. I can't say that I have ventured too far off from what was the prep phase going into it. I haven't had pretty much any meat other than some fish in a bit. I'm pretty much living on vegetables and eggs and some salmon.
Oh.
It's been nice. Like, I've actually lost a few pounds since a couple weeks ago. That's the biggest one. And I feel like that's one of the most important ones, is the nutrition. Because what we led with was food. And food obviously having a physiological impact is something to pay attention to, but also the mental impact. It takes a lot of mental energy to be distracted so easily by food. And it's such an easy way to fill time. Oh my gosh. It's great. I've definitely become less prone to that, though, with the changes on the diet side. That's been probably one of the more bigger ones that I'm really holding on to right now. How I eat, because that's going to influence, I would think, everything else. How you eat is going to determine your clarity of thought, how you feel throughout the day, and how you're thinking and how you're feeling sensationally is going to determine how you treat people. I think in very large part. And if you're feeling light and mentally mostly clear, maybe a little more energetic, you're probably going to be a more pleasant person to be around and be nicer to folks. Maybe take a little more action and be able to recognize those opportunities for maybe making someone's day a little bit better. It's going to start with the input. And the input is the food, in large part. Food and embracing moments of slowness and taking those as opportunities for reflection. Meditation's obviously been something that's come into it, rebuilding that practice, and definitely feeling some benefits, some changes with that. I've been less doubtful and anxious of a lot of things. Like, prior to, like, there's still plenty of things that I would say I'm looking to change and improve and spur, and those will come inevitably. All those things having been the same as they were 2 weeks ago, I feel far more relaxed. I'm not near as tense when I think about those situations. And in fact, I've taken more steps in the last week to create change in those situations than I have for those exact same situations the past few months. All you do is think about them and let them tense you up and stress you out, and that becomes distracting. And then you need a new distraction, so maybe you go, eat something that you probably shouldn't, which I think we're all susceptible to, or, any other kind of activity that, we ultimately know what's good for us and what's not. And we're always going to be susceptible to falling for those things that we know we shouldn't. And at that moment, the only freedom we have is choice. And trust your choices. I feel like those don't totally link, though, now that I say it.
No, I mean, you're trusting the choices of what you're putting in your body, trusting the choices of just waking up slowly and taking the day. You're just trusting it'll be fine. Like, doing that is not gonna change the course of your, even if it changes the course of your life in any way, you're more relaxed in embracing it. So it is this freedom of choosing whatever that is that comes to heart.
Recognizing the freedom of choice, and in those moments trusting your instincts.
Yeah. Instincts comes from your heart.
Believe that.
And for me, the integration of a lot of it has been to just look like this guy right here. Just take everything with like an open heart and open arms. Genuinely, I think the biggest change for me has been to accept and invite any moment as it comes. And to lead with heart. And it just kept on coming back every time to me since this ceremony is the more I lead with heart for the big decisions in my life, the more right it feels, almost always. Especially around people. Like what my heart tells me about this person, I think that's intuition, that's instinct. And the more I am in resonance with my heart, my mind kind of follows through. If I lead with my heart, my mind kind of follows. But so much of my thinking normally is from my mind that I've stopped listening to so much of my heart. And so the biggest switch for me has been to start with my heart and then whatever follows, follows. And the way it's changed me in terms of everyday life is I will say things without thinking twice about them.
You trust your words more?
Yeah. I guess I trust my words more because I don't doubt what calls to me. You know? It just flows more naturally. And when I'm thinking about what to say, it disrupts the flow of what actually has to be said. A good example of this was right after the ceremony. We drove to San Diego.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful drive.
Beautiful drive. San Diego is close to my heart. So much time there.
Your uncle was fantastic too.
Oh yeah, that's a whole thing. We were at Mendocino Farms.
Yeah. Oh, that kid. Yeah, that was... Yeah. Talk about agency, dude. You dug right in.
But it was my heart. There was the cashier at Mendocino Farms, restaurant we went to for dinner. I saw his name. I was like, Mercedes. I have never heard that name before.
You never heard the name Mercedes?
Not for a guy. I have come across one Mercedes, maybe. And I was like, that's a super cool name. And I was like, what are you up to? And he's like, you're just like working a couple of jobs. And I was like, wow, how do you handle that? He's like, just trying to figure out what I want to do. And I was like, wow. And then, there were people waiting behind us. And I just said, let's talk when you come to our table. And that's it. He can choose what he needs to from that. A few minutes later, we're waiting, and he comes up. By the way, almost never does the cashier just come up to give the food. So that was one thing. And then second thing, he told me he was studying at UCSD.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I studied there too. And then we started talking to him. And he just lays his heart out. Like, complete stranger, lays his heart out on what his situation is, how his mom is.
Yeah, he went deep real quick.
Yeah.
You created a space for him to do that. That was a side of you I feel like I had not seen in a way. Like I loved it. It was very gracious and like accepting. I think he felt that. You kind of at least probably came across as somewhat of a guide to him.
One of the guys that was the guide at this ceremony.
Yeah.
As we were saying bye to them, I said to him, I just felt like you're one of the elders here.
I know which one.
You know exactly which one. And I was like, dude, I just love the space you created for us to just be there. That's it. And just show up as vulnerable, as honest as possible. And he's like, just do that for someone else. That'll be the best thing you can take away from our interaction. And that stuck with me. And in that moment, that's literally what just came up. How can I be there for this person? And again, all we can give is our time and our energy, our attention. And the guy wanted attention. Like, he needed someone to listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell that he has been holding this to himself. And because he can't really share this with his family, because that's exactly what he's trying to figure out, is that relationship. And it was just a beautiful interaction.
It was.
And I think it's an interaction that is accessible anytime, with anyone. That was the experience of ayahuasca, just continuing on beyond that ceremony, is just opening up my own heart, and just like, whatever comes up, share that.
Yeah.
And that led him to sharing his heart, which I found to be just an amazing encounter in that situation. And I think he, at least from what I felt a little bit more trusting of his own path. Mm-hmm. And he might have just needed that in that moment. Is to like, hey, you don't see exactly what that is. And neither of us really, like, none of us really know what that is. So how can we just build more trust in the orientation we're at right now?
Yeah, it was beautiful. Because I remember you did that. And it reminded me of a very, very similar interaction I had with a stranger when I was working at a restaurant in Phoenix. I told you about that right after. A guy came in and asked me about what I was doing, and for whatever reason was curious, and it turned into a very inspirational interaction. He had done some pretty incredible things and overcome more than I could even imagine. And I think when you recognize those opportunities to essentially pay it forward.
And they're all around us, man.
They are.
There's as many opportunities as there are people.
Probably more.
Exactly. At least that first conversation with anyone, you go up to them and just ask them, how are they? And if you ask that sincerely, not how are you, like we've been accustomed to, people understand that. People care. People feel the sincerity of a how are you. And
you can't fake it.
You can't fake it. You can't fake it. If you fake it, you will get the fake back. Mm-hmm. And that's why we end up with good every time. But if we go beyond the good and we really understand the bad, I really think that the more that we dull the bad, the more we dull the good.
Need both sides now.
The frequency of our emotion changes on both sides by just experiencing frequency on one side.
Equal and opposite reactions.
100%. 100p.
Well, and that's where, at least to relate that, I think, to the real world, is where a lot of people sort of fall into repetitively dulling the bad, dulling pain, dulling suffering, which in turn, will dull. You're mitigating how bad something can feel, and in turn also suppressing how good something can feel, which is, why we see these patterns of alcoholism and, drug abuse, and anything from, cigarettes, marijuana, to whatever you want to call it. That dulling is so accessible. It's so easy.
Food.
Great one. What are we supposed to do about it? Just recognize opportunities to embrace it, to suffer how we must, because it's ultimately inevitable. I mean, isn't that sort of the basis or the conclusion of the Buddhists? Suffering is inevitable.
Yeah.
You kind of just got to embrace it. But when you do that, you got to remember that equal and opposite reaction. for something good to come with it. It makes me think of the Lotus Sutra.
Mm.
The whole idea of the flowers grow in the mud, right? It's the pain and the suffering that creates the beauty that comes later.
And to end this, sometimes you are inspiring someone by just being there. Sometimes we feel there is this act that needs to be put up, or we need to show up like, with this high intensity energy. But a lot of times people just need to hear what they have done and who they have been to feel inspired again.
Mm.
And just the act of being present with someone creates inspiration for themselves.
You've done that for me.
You've done the same for me, and I was thinking about this guy, who not this guy, the San Diego guy, who I think felt inspired not because we particularly said something, but because he just saw that he has done things before that he didn't think he could do.
Mm.
And he has been in situations before that he didn't think he could overcome.
Mm.
And that created enough trust in his own abilities to feel propelled to do the next thing. And there's things like that happening all the time. There's so many situations that I have seen where some person in the cafe down here in UT Austin is feeling low. You can just tell their energy is low in the morning. And a person comes up with a dog and says a good morning in a way that makes their morning good. Genuinely.
So well said.
It actually makes them change their, like, they mirror the energy of this person. So as a lesson to myself is to like create the energy that you want to mirror.
Create the energy that you want to mirror.
People will show up in the same way. People will feel the difference and actually resonate with you.
Think of it like a bird song.
What the fuck is that?
Like when you're trying to call a certain bird in your direction, a mating call.
Yeah.
You have to know the song of that particular bird. I've met a guy who can do a variety of whistles with his hands, and I would love to be able to do that one day. I kind of equate it to that. It's like singing the right song for the right crowd. You know, when you're resonant with what you truly believe, that's going to attract the same, and you'll recognize that when it's around. I think it might be how you cultivate a fruitful life and community and family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Commit to it and trust it. And try and make someone laugh once a day, even if it's yourself.
Anything else you want to end this with?
I was wondering that. I'd like to not leave anything on the table.
I want to end with something that I have in mind.
Okay.
Which is the path of least resistance. If there's anything that anyone wants to take away from listening to this, and if you have reached here, then you are already on our frequency. Because that is a long, long time. You will default to the path of least resistance at any point of your life. It is very easy to just do the bare minimum that you need to make things kind of just keep on going the way they are.
Maintain.
If you want to change, then you have to choose the path of harder resistance, not even the hardest resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And you just keep on building that resistance up, kind of like literally like a muscle at the gym. So put yourself in situations that make you increase the path of resistance.
Yeah, but in a way that's a tricky thing to communicate. Because you want to emphasize not getting in your own way to create that resistance, but accepting the challenges that are present that perhaps you've been putting off. Accepting those challenges now so that they don't create harder times later. It can ferment as you put it off. So yeah, I would say, I would agree with that. But, like, don't create that resistance.
Not create.
Now.
You just choose. You already know the path of harder resistance. Like, you know what is harder to do. This was harder to do than taking one camera, right? Like,
Yeah.
this was a harder thing to set up.
We didn't really do this the easy way now, did we?
We didn't do it the easy way. And with the intention that it creates more value. Not even for someone else maybe, but just in our experience of doing this. And now it becomes like a catalog that we can look back and go like, okay, we tried something new, and we tried it. It was much harder than what we could have done. And we can take it further and further and further. But can you choose the incremental next step, next stage, where you feel some resistance, but you can see it. Like, you can almost like hold on to it, but you're not that good to like actually go do a muscle up over it. You're just like there. And you stay there, and you keep coming back to that, and you start developing a better grip over it. And then you're able to propel yourself over it. Mm-hmm. That can only happen if you don't just choose to stand, but actually just jump.
Accept the challenge.
Put
yourself in a position for growth.
Yeah.
It's humbling. It's hard. It can be very emotional.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
It is worth it. Otherwise, it would come pretty easy. And if it's easy, then you don't have to try. If you don't have to try, then it has no worth.
I feel like you did that having started this whole project. Like, we'd started talking about this, I think, not long after we had met.
Yeah.
And witness the action, everything that's gone into it. I don't doubt this is something you're going to continue to do, and it's going to continue to evolve. That in itself is, at least in my opinion, exactly what you're describing. It's putting yourself in that position. It's like, well, I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Maybe not muscle up over it, stand out right away.
Yeah.
But you're going to flex it. You're going to work on it. You're going to keep working on it. I think took a slightly different approach with this one, but I think it's been fruitful.
It's been very fruitful. It's been very rewarding to just use your help in actually building this, honestly.
Oh, of course, man.
This is
I have no idea what I'm doing.
impressive. Don't worry. We're all there. We're all there. But just doing it creates more ideas, so this has given me another idea.
And I think just holding on to that habit.
Yeah.
Constantly experimenting.
Yeah.
I was curious enough.
Yeah.
How should we close this?
I hope we went into the entire gambit of our experience overall, and if it makes anyone curious to be as intentional as possible if you want to try something like this.
Yeah.
Come with like your intentions of what it is that I hope is answered through this experience, and not just for the heck of it. Because if you're just coming here for the heck of it, then you will have a heck of a ride. Because
it's a big risk to take.
It's a big risk to take. It'll question all your beliefs. For me, it did. It'll take you to the point of not knowing where anything is or what anything is, and it is psychedelic from that standpoint. Like, takes you to the end of it, but you come out of it with a new, lighter, and deeper appreciation.
It did for you.
That's what it did for me.
It did for me too.
Appreciation for just everyday life and living more with everyday life than planning and thinking about every single thing that you have going on in the next few years of your life, because there's anything that's certain, it's just this, nothing else is, and it should be okay to just flow with that.
And trust the process.
Trust is the biggest thing, the first thing that unlock everything else. And it has shown up in my life already. Trusting the process has shown up in my professional life. It has shown up in the quality of thoughts I'm having. My meditation became to look at the end of the day and just think about what did I learn every single day. And that has become the guiding principle of living every day, is like, what am I learning? And before it was much more unintentional. I was always curious and wanted to learn, but now that I've put it into practice as something that I write down, it brings more grounding to a thought that can just be fleeting and never come back. Embodying the learnings is much more important now than before, I would say. And they don't have to be 10 things that you're learning. It's a single thing that you learn is huge, because you learn one thing every day about yourself or others or anything around this world.
That stacks up pretty quick.
365 days, bro. You have 365 new things that you've learned. And then you stack that up across years and decades. That's wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the last conversation I had with Louis Schulman about you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on experience. You don't learn from ideas, you learn from reflecting on ideas. And it's the act of actively looking back at what happened and then propelling yourself forward for the next action that creates progress.
I love that. Surely you do learn from experience, but I think you really absorb more through the reflection of it. That's how you say.
Yeah, you know how they say, like, teaching is the best way to learn something?
Absolutely.
I think that's what reflection is doing.
Yeah.
Is that you're teaching yourself to actually pick up something from that thing. So it's the highest percentage of it that you can retain is from that. Yeah, just be intentional. Trust yourself.
Trust the process.
Trust the process.
The effort is the prize.
The effort is the prize. And give more of yourself in everyday situations to others, because everyone needs it.
Yeah. Do the hard thing. It's probably not really that hard.
Yeah. It's harder in thought than it is in action. And power comes from moving from thought to action in the shortest amount of time as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You give yourself more power. So think about something and you want to do it, just do it. Every thought you have that you want to create into something in reality, try to do more of those things rather than just thinking about them. And it's by switching off from a thought to just then actually embodying it in experience. That's been my takeaway. This has been quite a conversation.
Yeah, this has been a good reflection moment for myself, actually. I feel like I've relearned and learned a few new things just talking about it that I didn't immediately, having gone through it. So lends some credence to that last conversation, too. Thank you for setting this up.
I'm so glad that we did this not a year from now and right now, because that
Thanks for not letting me put this off.
That conversation would have just been completely different. Anyways, I think this is a good place to start. Stop. Cool. Start is not the move. Stop is the move. Alright, guys. Anyone that's watching this, thank you from the bottom of my heart, because that means actually a lot. Because you gave your time and attention, which is crazy in this world we live in. So, thank you.